So in today's video, we're talking about Fissidens. So what's going on, everybody? Justin from H2O Plants, and today we're talking about Fissidens in two types. I have Fissidens Fontanus and Fissidens Nobilis, and I thought I would just do a little video discussing the difference between the two, kind of some care tactics to it, and what I think you should do with these if you ever order them and what to expect. So let's get into it. So first, let's take a look at Fissidens Fontanus, and this is a much smaller version. I'll see if I could get there we go. Now you can see how small the fronds there are. They're a very tiny frond, but they're very, very pretty. There's one you can see. Now these remind me, if you ever had like a peacock feather and the wispy end of it, how the very end of the feather like strands are like kind of like flowy, and like if you ever wave it around, they kind of just, I don't know, they're very wavy. So this reminds me of it. Underwater, that's the kind of appearance that it has. I would think of like a peacock feather when you're looking at this. So it's a very easy to grow plant, and this is actually a plant that is very prolific and will most likely take over your aquarium, and not in a bad way. It won't like kill other plants, it won't suffocate them out, but it will grow anywhere that is exposed that it can latch onto. So rocks, driftwood, gravel, substrate, anywhere where there's an open spot and it can latch onto it, it will. So it's very cool because you could literally just throw this in one part of your aquarium, wait like 6 months, and all of a sudden you'll see it popping up everywhere else in your aquarium. Just because as fronds become disattached, they'll lodge themselves somewhere and they'll just start growing. And it's very, I mean, most mosses do that, but this one is extremely good at that. And I find it in the weirdest spots in the aquariums that I've kept this in before. And it's just like, how the hell did that get over there? It somehow found a way. But it's a very easy moss. And with really both of these, they're both relatively easy. What I will say is when you're planting these, unless you have a specific design in mind, it's best to keep them attached to the mesh here because they're on stainless steel mesh. So this does a couple of things. One, it keeps it anchored down. So it's not going to be free floating. It's not going to float anywhere. You don't need to use super glue or tie it down or anything like that. You could literally just plop this on like a rock or driftwood. You could even bend these meshes if you need to. They're bendable. So if you want it to like fit to like a log somehow, you could just bend it and rest it on there. And that's what I recommend to do. I don't recommend separating the moss from the mesh because it's just easier to handle and easier to use. Now, if you wanted to, you could also cut the mesh in sections. If you had some stainless steel, or not stainless steel, but if you had some metal shearers, they're basically metal scissors. You could even almost use a really good pair of scissors. I actually have a pair that cuts this because it's such a tiny mesh. And then you can make little cubes out of it if you want to divide this. You could divide this up into 4. This is I think a 2x2 or a 3x3 section. I think it's 3x3. So you get a pretty decent amount of moss. Now, a couple things with this moss. It really doesn't need to be trimmed. It grows super short. It doesn't get out of control where like most mosses do. They just keep growing and growing and growing in masses. This just spreads out and it stays relatively low to the ground. So you're not going to have a giant bushel of this thing all of a sudden popping up out of nowhere. But it will just cover areas. It's really nice when it does, especially on like rocks. You'll just see it starting to grow in its crevices and whatnot. So it's just a really cool moss. So no trimming is required. Temperatures, parameters, all that doesn't really matter with this plant. Mosses do like cooler water, but they can handle up to like 80, 82, no problem. Anything above that, you're gonna run into some trouble. But these mosses are really resilient, and even in cool or warmer temperatures, they do just fine. And you see like here, I just pulled off a piece by accident, and like that's what'll happen. Like it'll just come loose, float around the aquarium, boom, there you go, new moss. So now if you wanted to, you could separate it from here. It's not a big problem, but it's just like I said, it's easier to handle when it's on the mesh. So that's Fissidens Fontanus. This is honestly one of my favorite types of mosses just because of how fast it grows. But this one is equally as impressive to me. This is Nobilis, and it looks a little bit smaller, but the sheet is roughly about the same size and maybe like a 1/4 of an inch smaller. But that's just because this is grown out all the way to the edges, and this one is just touching the edges. So the other one is like well beyond the edges of it. And this one, so this one reminds me a lot of fern plants. So if you ever seen like ferns, if you look at the leaves or the fronds here, let's see. They kind of like, they're perking up, and they also do look like feathers, but not like peacock feathers. Boom, there you go. You can see that right there. So they're very cool looking. It's a much brighter green. The Fissidens Fontanus is a dark green. This is a lighter green. And so Fissidens Fontanus kind of hangs over. Fissidens Nobilis, which is this one has it where the fronds kind of stick straight up like this or off to an angle, but not completely curled over. So it looks really nice, but yet again, this won't grow that tall. This is only going to be as tall as the fronds, which only get maybe, I would call that maybe 1/4 of an inch tall. They're not, let's see, if I hold that flat. Focus. Let's see. Boom. You can see right there. They're not that tall. So very similar to the Fontanus is it will spread anywhere where these get lodged. Eventually they'll come loose, or a fish make graves on it, pull it out, and it'll float somewhere else. So almost identical plants, just two different looks. And I just want to do like a little brief video showcasing it. So that way if you're looking at buying one and you're not sure which one to get, you can pick your choice. This one is more of a quote unquote rare or harder to find moss, although it's becoming more and more available. So it's not that. I would like rank it if you had common, uncommon, and rare. This would be in the uncommon slot. So it's not where you won't find this in every like plant store that you go to. You won't find it in big box stores typically. You really have to go to like a specialty shop or shop online to find it. So it's more in the uncommon slot. Fissidens Fontanus is a moss that's actually been around for a while, so this may be available in your local fish stores relatively easily. But this is more of a common moss, but it's still kind of hard to find sometimes. So, and I prefer these over, say, Java moss. A lot of people recommend Java moss. They say it's so easy, it's a great plant. And well, that may be true. So the problem with like Java moss or Christmas moss or any of those other types of moss is they grow and they keep growing. So if you're not looking to have to trim a whole lot, these are your go-tos because these don't require a whole lot of trimming, if any. Where Christmas moss, Java moss, all those will require lots of trimming or grooming and maintenance because they're just going to keep growing into a larger mass. Instead of essentially spreading, they just keep growing. So with these, they just spread. They don't grow a mass, you know, so that's why I like these guys. They're really good. But that's really it, guys. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you hit that like button and leave me a comment down below. Let me know what you think of Fissidens. Do you have any? Are you considering getting some? These aren't the only two types of Fissidens. I've actually shown other types in videos before. These are just the two that we readily have available, and they're very kind of easy to get our hands on. The other ones are much harder. And if you're new here and you enjoy plants or planted aquariums, make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you want to check out our last video that we did on jungle valves, you can click over there. If you want to check out our video that's random and special to you, you can click right over here, and I'll see you guys next time.